He told her, "I want a child, but not with you." 4 years later, fate brings them face to face again. She's a successful mother with twins, radiant and untouchable, and he's a billionaire haunted by regret. Can a man who once broke her heart win her back, or is this reunion destined to shatter everything once more? Watch as love, betrayal and passion collide in a story that will leave you breathless until the very last moment. I'm so glad you're here. Tell me, where are you watching from today? This story is filled with heartbreak, passion, and a love you won't forget. Make sure you watch till the very end, because every moment will leave you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that touches the heart. Now let's dive right in. Amara's heels clicked softly against the marble floor of Cross Enterprises, the sound echoing through the grand hallway like a countdown to an unseen storm. Every step carried the weight of years she had given to this firm, years of late nights, missed birthdays, and quiet sacrifices. The city outside buzzed with the rhythm of ambition, but inside her pulse raced for a reason far more personal. Her reflection in the glass wall looked composed: silk blouse, pencil skirt, neatly braided hair. But her heart trembled beneath that calm surface, whispering the truth she could no longer hide. She had promised herself she'd face him today, even if it shattered everything she'd built. Damien Cross's office loomed at the end of the hallway like a throne room carved out of ice and power. Everyone in the company feared that door. Behind it was the man whose smile could close million-dollar deals and whose silence could end careers. He was a legend, a perfectionist, and a man who had never been denied anything he desired, except maybe this, what he was about to hear from her. As she paused before the door, Amara's hand brushed her lower abdomen unconsciously. Her secret had a heartbeat now. When she entered, the air shifted. Damien stood by the window, his tailored suit sculpting every inch of his disciplined frame, the city lights behind him forming a halo of cold brilliance. He didn't look up immediately. He never did. "You're late," he said, voice smooth but sharp, a melody wrapped in steel. She swallowed hard, steadying her voice. "I needed time to make sure I said this right." That made him turn, his piercing blue eyes locking onto her face like he was dissecting her thoughts before she even spoke them. For months, their connection had been a dangerous dance, unspoken attraction woven into arguments and lingering glances. No one knew about the night it all broke, the night the walls they built crumbled into heat and surrender. He'd kissed her like a man starved, she'd given herself like a woman finally seen. But the morning after, the CEO mask had returned, and the warmth had vanished like a ghost in daylight. Now, standing before him, she could feel the same invisible walls rising again, daring her to break through. "I'm pregnant," she said softly, but the words landed like thunder. For a moment, silence stretched across the room, thick enough to suffocate. Damien's gaze flickered, shock, denial, calculation, before his jaw tightened. "What did you just say?" he asked, though he'd heard every syllable. Her voice trembled, yet her eyes didn't flinch. "You heard me, Damien. I'm carrying your child." His expression didn't change at first, but the faint movement in his throat betrayed him. His fingers brushed against the desk, knuckles pale from pressure. The silence grew unbearable, and then he laughed, low, sharp, disbelieving. "You expect me to believe this, or is this your way of holding me hostage?" Her stomach twisted. "I'm not that woman," she replied, her tone cracking between pride and pain. "I thought you knew me better." He stepped closer, his cologne wrapping around her like temptation and danger. "I know you're smart, ambitious, not foolish enough to think something like this could mean anything." Amara felt her knees weaken but forced herself to stand taller. "It means everything to me," she said, her voice firm. "You may not want to see it, but this happened between us. You can't erase it like another contract." Damien's expression darkened, emotion flickering behind his control. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something vulnerable, almost afraid. But then his tone cut through her hope like a blade. "I want a child, but not with you." The words hung in the air, echoing against glass and silence. They didn't just end a conversation, they killed something sacred inside her. Her chest tightened, her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not in front of him. She took a step back, whispering, "You don't mean that." He didn't answer, only turned his back to her, eyes fixed once again on the skyline, as if the city was easier to face than her pain. Amara's vision blurred, but anger began to steady her trembling hands. "You think power gives you the right to humiliate people?" she asked quietly. And he turned, slowly, dangerously. "Don't twist this, Amara. You knew the rules. I never promised you love." She laughed bitterly. "You didn't have to. The way you looked at me said it all. I was foolish enough to believe that look meant something." His lips parted as if to reply, but she raised a hand. "Don't." "You've said enough for a moment." Neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city far below and the ragged rhythm of two hearts breaking. She turned away, blinking fast, trying to hold on to her dignity. Each step toward the door felt like walking through quicksand. Damien's eyes followed her, guilt flickering in their depths, but pride held him silent. Her hand touched the doorknob, and for a split second she paused. Maybe he'd stop her. Maybe he'd whisper her name, drop the arrogance, say something human. But behind her there was only silence. That silence told her everything she needed to know. She walked out, head high, tears finally breaking free once she was alone in the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected a woman who had loved recklessly and paid the price. But there was a spark behind her pain now, a promise to never let his rejection define her. Down in the lobby, people moved in a blur around her, employees, clients, guards, but she felt invisible, trapped in her own storm. Her phone buzzed with Damien's name flashing on screen. Her heart jumped, but when she answered, his voice was cold, businesslike. "We'll handle this privately. Whatever you need, money, arrangements, it'll be taken care of." That final insult snapped something inside her. "Keep your money, Damien," she whispered. "You can't buy your way out of this one." She hung up before he could reply. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, soaking through her blouse. The city lights blurred behind the curtain of water, mirroring the haze in her eyes. Every drop felt like the world cleansing her of his touch. She walked aimlessly through the streets, one hand resting on her abdomen, whispering to the life inside her, "You're not unwanted. You're my strength now." Back in his office, Damien stood frozen, phone still in his hand, heart pounding faster than it had in years. Her words echoed in his mind. "You can't buy your way out of this one." For the first time, the man who had conquered empires felt powerless. He turned to the window again, staring into the storm, but this time it didn't calm him, it haunted him. In the dark reflection of the glass, he saw himself, the man who had everything yet felt something missing. His chest ached, though he'd never admit why. He poured himself a drink, hands trembling slightly, the rare crack in his armor showing. The lightning outside illuminated his face for a moment, revealing regret he couldn't name. "A child," he whispered, his voice rough. "With her?" But the tone wasn't disgust, it was fear. Fear of what it could mean, of how she made him feel something he couldn't control. Meanwhile, Amara reached her small apartment, drenched and exhausted. The walls that once felt safe now seemed smaller, closing in around her. She sat on the couch, cradling herself, the city's thunder echoing her heart. "You'll be fine," she whispered again and again, convincing herself with every breath. She picked up her resignation letter from the table, the one she'd written weeks ago when she first realized she couldn't stay in that company forever. Tonight, it was more than a letter. It was her liberation. As dawn crept through the rain, she placed her ID badge beside the letter, the symbol of years spent proving herself to a man who never saw her worth beyond his desire. She stood, straightened her shoulders, and whispered, "You lost more than you know, Damien." The morning sun broke through the clouds just then, falling across her face like quiet reassurance. Miles away, Damien hadn't slept. His office still glowed with light, papers scattered across his desk, untouched. The empire he ruled suddenly felt hollow. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her leaving, her walk, her silence, the strength she carried even in heartbreak. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "It's better this way." But the crack in his voice betrayed the lie. Outside, the first rays of light touched the skyline, and in that golden hour, two hearts beat under the same sky. One learning to let go, the other realizing what he might have already lost. And as Amara stood by her window, looking out at the awakening city, she didn't know that this bitter declaration was only the beginning of a story neither of them could escape. Would she keep her promise to herself and move on, or would destiny find its way back to rewrite the pain he caused? The morning after the storm that ended her world, Amara had stood by her small window, her reflection merging with the sunrise, a broken woman holding the smallest flicker of new hope. 4 years later, that same woman no longer lived in the shadows of her pain. The city now whispered her name with admiration. Amara Lewis, founder of Zaria and Nia Designs, the brand every modern woman wanted to wear. Her boutique sat in the heart of downtown, a space filled with color, confidence, and the sound of laughter, most of it belonging to two little girls whose presence turned her home into heaven. Zaria, the curious one with a radiant smile, and Nia, the thoughtful twin with eyes too wise for her age, were her reason to breathe. Their laughter had replaced every tear she once shed, and their hugs erased the last traces of Damien's cruelty from her soul, or so she believed. Each morning began with chaos wrapped in love. "Mommy, my braid is crooked," Zaria would complain while Nia tried to fix it herself. Amara would laugh, her voice warm like honey. "My little designer already," she teased, gently twisting the braid straight. The twins giggled, climbing onto her lap, asking stories about how their mom became the boss lady. She always smiled, hiding the ache behind her ribs. "Because I believed in myself," she would say softly, never mentioning the heartbreak that pushed her to rise. Her boutique's success came from her fire. Every rejection, every insult Damien threw at her became the fuel for her empire. The same woman he dismissed had now built a name that even Cross Enterprises had tried to partner with, but she rejected every offer that came from his orbit. Her brand wasn't just a business, it was her declaration of survival. She had risen without him, and the world saw it. Yet, every night after putting the twins to bed, when the house grew silent, she would sometimes glance at their faces, so innocent, so beautiful, and see pieces of him in their eyes. And in those rare moments, her heart would ache with the question she never dared voice. Would he ever know them? Mini cliffhanger. Across town, Damien Cross sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by glass and gold, but the silence around him was deafening. The empire had grown, deals tripled, and his name commanded fear and respect. Yet beneath the sharp suits and steely confidence lay an emptiness that no success could fill. His assistants noticed it. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. The way he stared out the window too long, as though waiting for something or someone. He had dated women since Amara left, all elegant, all beautiful, none memorable. They came and went, just like meetings on his schedule. What lingered, what haunted, was her voice echoing in his mind. "You can't buy your way out of this one." He never admitted it aloud, but those words were the last ones that ever made him feel small and human. He had once told himself she'd fade away like everyone else who dared to leave him. Instead, she became the ghost that followed him into every boardroom, every quiet night. Even now, when he heard the faint laughter of a child outside his window, something inside him twisted, though he couldn't explain why. Fate, however, had its own plans. That evening, the city's elite gathered for the Metropolitan Business Gala, a grand celebration of innovation, wealth, and vanity. The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 chandelier lights, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Damien arrived in his usual black tuxedo, the very image of control and dominance. Cameras flashed as he entered, women turned their heads, and men shook his hand with admiration tinged with envy. But beneath his calm exterior, something restless stirred, a whisper in his chest, a strange pull he couldn't ignore. On the other side of that glittering hall, Amara walked in, elegance personified. Her caramel-brown skin glowed under the lights, her fitted emerald gown tracing her curves with quiet confidence. Her hair, styled in soft waves, framed her face like a queen returning to her throne. But she wasn't alone. Zaria and Nia, dressed in matching white dresses, held her hands tightly, their laughter bright enough to outshine diamonds. Heads turned as she entered. Whispers followed her name. "That's Amara Lewis," someone said, "the woman who turned heartbreak into brilliance." She didn't come here for attention. She came because her brand had been nominated for Creative Visionary of the Year. Yet deep down, a flicker of nervous energy stirred in her chest. The last time she had been in a room with this much power, she had walked out shattered. Tonight she stood tall, not as someone's employee, but as a woman who had rebuilt her life, piece by piece. Damien had been speaking with investors when his gaze drifted across the ballroom. And then, his world stopped. The crowd faded, the music dulled, and his breath caught. There she was, Amara, the woman he had pushed away, the woman whose silence had haunted his dreams. But she wasn't the same. There was a light in her eyes now, a confidence that seemed untouchable, and beside her, 2 little girls. His chest tightened as he watched them. They had her warmth, her smile, but something else, something achingly familiar. Amara's head lifted slightly, sensing the weight of a stare she knew too well. Her heart skipped. She turned and met his eyes. Time collapsed in that moment. Memories flashed like lightning, his words, her tears, their night, her escape. And now here they were again, separated by years and choices, yet connected by something neither could deny. The chandelier's light caught the shimmer in her eyes, and Damien's heart, long thought untouchable, thudded painfully in his chest. He tried to move toward her, but his legs refused to obey. For the first time in his life, Damien Cross, man of power, control, and authority, felt utterly helpless. His throat tightened as he saw her bend down, whisper something to one of the twins. The child giggled, and the sound was like a melody he'd never heard yet somehow remembered. His mind spun. Could it be number? It couldn't. Across the room, Amara steadied her breathing. She had promised herself she would never let him see her shaken again. "Girls," she said softly, "stay close to Mommy." They nodded, gripping her hands tighter. Her heart pounded as Damien started walking toward her, each step deliberate, slow, and filled with the gravity of 4 lost years. The crowd seemed to part unconsciously, as though sensing an invisible tension between them. When he finally stood a few feet away, words failed him. Up close, she was even more breathtaking than memory allowed. He noticed the subtle strength in her shoulders, the peace in her posture. She looked like a woman who had conquered storms and built her own sunlight. "Amara," he said, the name tasting both sweet and painful. Her expression didn't waver. "Mr. Cross," she greeted, her tone polite yet distant, every syllable a wall between them. He glanced at the twins again, something raw flickering in his eyes. "They're beautiful," he murmured. Amara's spine stiffened. "They are," she replied softly, "and they don't need validation from anyone." His chest constricted, the unspoken truth pressing between them like a silent wound. "Are they—" he started, but she cut him off. "Don't," she whispered, her eyes glimmering with warning. "You lost the right to ask anything about my life the day you threw me away." The crowd buzzed around them, oblivious to the war unfolding in that corner of the gala. Damien's face softened with regret, but guilt alone couldn't bridge the years. He wanted to apologize, but every word died on his tongue. He had faced investors, politicians, and billionaires without blinking, but this woman, this moment, left him defenseless. Before he could gather his thoughts, Amara's name was announced on stage. She turned from him without another word, her gown shimmering like defiance as she walked toward the spotlight. The twins clapped excitedly, cheering for their mother. Damien stood frozen, watching as she accepted her award, her speech calm yet powerful. "4 years ago," she said, her voice steady, "I thought my life had ended. But sometimes the greatest heartbreaks build the strongest women." The audience erupted in applause, but Damien heard only the unspoken truth behind her words. It was meant for him. As the evening continued, Amara avoided him, focusing on her daughters and guests who congratulated her. But Damien couldn't leave. Every time she smiled, it hurt. Every laugh from the twins pulled at something buried deep within him. He ordered another drink, though it did nothing to dull the ache. When he finally gathered the courage to approach her again, she was gone, vanished into the crowd like a memory fading with the music. Outside, as Amara stepped into her car with her daughters, she exhaled deeply, her heart trembling from the encounter she hadn't wanted but couldn't avoid. Zaria rested her head on her shoulder, murmuring, "Mommy, that man was looking at us funny." Amara smiled faintly. "He's just someone from Mommy's past," she said softly, staring out the window as city lights blurred into streaks of gold. But in her chest, her heart whispered differently. Inside the gala hall, Damien stood by the exit, watching the door she had walked through, his jaw clenched, his hand tightening around his glass. He had spent 4 years convincing himself she was gone for good, but tonight had proved the opposite. She was more alive than ever, and the sight of those girls had cracked open something he could no longer ignore. The child he had once rejected now lived in the form of 2 beautiful souls, and now, for the first time in his life, Damien Cross, the man who could have anything, realized there was something he wanted that money could never buy back. As the music faded and the night drew to its quiet end, Damien looked out over the glittering cityscape and whispered to himself, "I want to see them again." But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because the woman who once walked away had built a world that didn't need him anymore. Would Damien dare to chase the family he once denied, or would Amara's new strength prove unbreakable against the man who once shattered her heart? The city slept beneath a silver moon, but Damien Cross could not. His penthouse, usually a symbol of control and victory, felt like a glass prison tonight. Every reflection he caught of himself in the windows reminded him of her. Amara's defiant eyes, her graceful walk, the sound of her daughter's laughter. That sound had followed him home, echoing through the hollow silence of his luxurious loneliness. He loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, but even the finest whiskey couldn't dull the ache tightening in his chest. The night of the gala had cracked something inside him. For years, he'd lived believing power could replace peace, but now every achievement tasted empty, every win felt meaningless. He stood by the window, looking down at the glowing city below, whispering to himself words he'd never said before. "I've lost her." The confession startled him. Damien Cross didn't lose. He built, conquered, owned. But tonight, he realized there were things no empire could buy. Somewhere out there, The woman he had once dismissed now thrived without him, and two little girls he had never met carried pieces of his soul. His phone buzzed on the desk, an email from a global investor, another multi-million-dollar deal. But he ignored it. His thoughts were elsewhere, circling back to the way Amara had looked at him, proud, untouchable. At that very hour across the city, Amara sat in her bedroom, the twins finally asleep after a day filled with excitement. The award from the gala rested on her nightstand, a symbol of triumph born from pain. She brushed her fingers over the engraved letters, her name shining beneath the soft glow of her bedside lamp. Yet even as pride filled her heart, something else lurked beneath it, a faint tremor of unease. Seeing Damien again had stirred emotions she had buried deep under her success. He had looked at her as though time had stopped, as though he still knew her heartbeat. But she wasn't that woman anymore, the one who cried behind closed doors, the one who believed his promises. She had built a new life, one filled with love that didn't depend on his approval. Still, her mind replayed the look on his face when he saw Zarya and Naya, shock, regret, longing, and it terrified her that part of her heart had felt something. The next morning brought sunlight and normalcy, or so she tried to pretend. Zarya and Nia burst into the kitchen, chasing each other around the island, laughter spilling into the air like a song. Amara smiled, stirring her coffee, grounding herself in their joy. "Mommy, will we see that man again?" Nia asked suddenly, eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Amara froze for a moment, her spoon clinking softly against the mug. "No, sweetheart," she said gently, forcing a smile. "He's just someone Mommy used to work with." The twins nodded, unconvinced but distracted soon after by pancakes and syrup. But inside, Amara knew the truth. Fate wasn't done with them. Damien had seen too much, and the look in his eyes had said it all. He wouldn't walk away this time. Days passed, yet peace didn't return. Damien found excuses to pass near Amara's office building, his car often idling a few blocks away from her boutique. He told himself it was coincidence, but deep down, he knew better. He wanted to see her again, to say something, anything that could undo the past. His assistant, noticing his distraction, finally asked, "Sir, are you all right?" "You've been cancelling meetings." He snapped, "I'm fine." But the tone was hollow. The once unshakable CEO now lived inside a restless fog, haunted by memories he couldn't outthink. Meanwhile, Amara tried to stay busy. The boutique had new clients, and her designs were now being featured in high-end magazines. Yet even amidst success, she found herself glancing toward the glass door each time the bell chimed, half expecting to see him. The thought angered her. She had promised herself she'd never let him rent space in her mind again. But the heart has its own language, and no matter how much she silenced it, it kept whispering his name. One afternoon, as Amara was sketching a new collection, a familiar scent caught her off guard, sandalwood and crisp cologne. She froze, the pencil slipping from her fingers. "Hello, Amara," came that deep voice she'd once known too well. She turned slowly, her pulse racing. Damien stood by the door, taller than memory, his blue eyes softer yet filled with an ache that wasn't there years ago. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly, though her voice betrayed a slight tremor. "I know," he replied, stepping closer. "But I had to see you." Her team looked up awkwardly from their desks, sensing the tension. She gave a quick signal, and they quietly excused themselves. The room fell silent. "What do you want?" she asked, folding her arms. Damien hesitated, his gaze dropping to the sketches scattered on her table. "You built this," he said softly. "Without me." She exhaled sharply. "Yes, without you." That's the point. He flinched at the truth. "I deserve that," he admitted. "But when I saw you that night, saw them..." His voice cracked slightly. "Amara, are they..." "Don't," she cut in, her eyes flashing. "Don't ask questions you once told me never to answer." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong," he said quietly, words heavy with something she never thought she'd hear from him. Regret. "You think that changes anything?" she whispered. "Do you think you can walk in here, say sorry, and undo what you did?" His silence was her answer. "You broke something you can't fix, Damien." He looked at her, eyes glistening with something dangerously close to emotion. "You're right," he said, "but that doesn't mean I don't want to try." Her throat tightened, and for a split second she saw the man beneath the arrogance, the one who had once kissed her like she was the only woman alive. But she blinked the memory away. It's too late. She turned away, hiding the tears she refused to let fall. Damien stood there for a moment, staring at her back, realizing for the first time what true loss felt like. He wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder, but his hand dropped before it could. "You've built a beautiful life," he said quietly. "I can see that. His voice faded. "I don't know how to live with what I did." Amara turned slightly, meeting his eyes. "You live with it by staying away," she said firmly. "For their sake." "For mine." He nodded slowly, pain flickering across his face. "If that's what you want," he said, stepping back. "It's what I need," she corrected softly. After he left, Amara's composure finally cracked. She sat at her desk, hands trembling, tears slipping down silently. It wasn't anger anymore. It was the ache of remembering what could have been. That night, Damien couldn't sleep again. Her words looped endlessly in his mind. He walked through his apartment, restless, pouring glass after glass, trying to drown the memory of her voice, but it only grew louder. Finally, in the quiet hours before dawn, he did something he never thought he would. He picked up his phone, found her number, one he had memorized years ago, and called. The line rang once, twice. His heart pounded. On the third ring she answered, her sleepy voice soft and confused. "Hello!" For a moment he couldn't speak. The sound of her voice melted every layer of distance between them. "Amara," he breathed, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I shouldn't be calling, but I can't stop thinking about you. Or them." Her breath caught. Silence filled the line, heavy with unspoken truths. She sat up slowly, the moonlight painting silver across her skin. "Damien," she whispered, unsure whether to hang up or listen. His tone broke through the silence, raw and unfamiliar. "You don't have to forgive me. I need to hear that you're okay." Her throat tightened, emotions warring inside her. Part of her wanted to scream at him for reopening wounds that had barely healed, and another part, a fragile, hidden part, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had changed. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Why after all this time?" There was a pause. "Because," he said quietly, "I saw what I lost. And I don't know how to live pretending I never cared." Her heart clenched. "You didn't care then," she said. "I did," he replied, voice breaking. "I was just too afraid to show it." Tears filled her eyes, unwanted but unstoppable. "You're good with words, Damien," she whispered, "but words don't rebuild trust." He exhaled sharply. "Then tell me how to start." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "You can't start something that ended long ago." He hesitated. "Amara, are they really mine?" The question lingered like a forbidden truth between them. She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Good night, Damien." She ended the call before her heart betrayed her. He stood there, staring at the phone, the emptiness in his chest deeper than ever before. The line was dead, but the connection between them had sparked again. Fragile, dangerous, alive. Amara sat in the dark, her phone still in her hand, her heart racing uncontrollably. The twins stirred softly in the next room, and she walked to their doorway, watching them sleep peacefully. Her eyes softened. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered. But as she looked at their faces, so innocent, so perfect, she knew the truth she'd tried to hide could no longer stay buried forever. Across the city, Damien lay awake, replaying every word of their conversation. He had glimpsed a door he thought forever closed, and now he couldn't stop himself from wanting to open it again. Would Amara's heart let him back in, or would the unspoken truth finally tear open everything she had fought to protect? The morning after Damien's late-night call lingered like smoke that refused to clear. The city awoke beneath a golden sunrise, unaware that two hearts had just reopened old wounds under its glowing skyline. Amara tried to convince herself it meant nothing, that his voice, low and trembling, hadn't reached the part of her soul she had buried 4 years ago. Yet every time her twins laughed, she caught herself thinking of his eyes, the ones that had once shattered her. Life had gone on, yes, but now fate had other plans. Within days their paths crossed again, not in romance, not yet, but through business, that cruelly convenient web that tied two unwilling hearts together. Damien's company had just signed a major collaboration with one of Amara's high-profile clients, forcing her to step into boardrooms she had once sworn to avoid. The moment she walked in, poised and regal in a flowing ivory suit, his world seemed to stop again. Those same blue eyes that had once dismissed her now followed her like gravity, every word she spoke reminding him of the woman he had lost, the woman who had become everything without him. He sat there in silence, pretending to read his notes, but his mind was chaos. Her scent, her confidence, the way she refused to look at him directly, it all cut through him like punishment he knew he deserved. Amara, on the other hand, stood tall, her smile controlled, her tone firm but elegant. She wasn't the young, hopeful woman who had once trembled under his gaze. She was power now. Every inch of her radiated the grace of someone who had survived heartbreak and turned it into armor. Yet beneath that calm, her pulse betrayed her. She could feel the weight of his stare, the intensity that used to unravel her completely. For a fleeting second, their eyes met, and the air shifted. The other executives noticed the strange, charged silence that fell between them, but neither flinched. Amara broke the gaze first, choosing professionalism over the flood of memories clawing at her heart. Mini cliffhanger. Would she be able to hold her composure as he began to slowly, silently chase her again? Later that week, they found themselves at the same social charity gala, a coincidence too ironic to ignore. Damien had promised himself he'd stay away, but the moment he heard her company was among the sponsors, he couldn't resist. Amara entered the ballroom in a sleek emerald gown that seemed to catch the light and his heart in one motion. The crowd parted for her, not because of her fame, but because of the quiet power she carried, the kind that demanded respect. Damien's breath hitched as he watched her smile politely at guests, keeping her distance, never once acknowledging his presence. But the more she ignored him, the deeper his regret grew. He wanted to approach her, to say the words that had been burning inside him since that night years ago, but his feet refused to move. She wasn't just Amara anymore. She was a woman he no longer deserved, but couldn't stop craving. As the evening progressed, rain began to tap against the tall glass windows, soft at first, then relentless, as thunder rolled above the city. The storm outside seemed to echo the one building within both of them. Amara excused herself to check on her daughters. Zarya and Nia had caught mild fevers earlier that day, and though they were resting with the nanny, a mother's instinct could never rest easy. But as she reached home later that night, soaked and breathless from the sudden downpour, she froze at the sight before her. Damien standing at her doorstep, drenched, unannounced, and holding a small bag of medicines and soup. Her first instinct was anger, her second was confusion, her third, something she couldn't name. "How do you even know where I live?" she asked, her voice low but sharp, masking the tremor beneath. He didn't answer immediately. His hair clung to his forehead, his usual composure replaced by something human, raw, almost desperate. "Zaria's school sent a card to my office once," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude, Amara, I had to make sure they were okay." The sound of his voice, stripped of ego, softened her defenses for a heartbeat before she caught herself. "You lost the right to care years ago," she replied coldly, but her hand didn't close the door. Mini cliffhanger. Would she let him in? Or would pride force her to keep him out in the storm? The twins' weak voices from inside changed everything. "Mommy! Who's that?" Nia called out, her tiny cough following her words. Amara sighed, stepping aside reluctantly. "Come in," she whispered, though her tone carried more warning than warmth. Damien entered slowly, his presence altering the entire atmosphere of her cozy home. The warmth of the lamps, the faint scent of lavender candles, it all clashed against the memory of their last encounter in his cold, glass-walled office years ago. He looked around, taking in the family photos on the walls, pictures of the twins growing up, birthdays he had missed, laughter he had never shared. Each frame struck him like a confession of his own absence. He followed Amara quietly to the twins' room, where both girls lay tucked under soft blankets. Their eyes fluttered open at the sight of him. "Hi there," he whispered, his voice catching. Zaria smiled sleepily. "You look like the man in Mommy's pictures," she said innocently, and Amara froze, her heart skipping. Damien's throat tightened as he smiled faintly. "Maybe I am," he said softly, sitting by the bedside. In that moment, something inside him cracked open, the realization of everything he had thrown away. Amara watched him, torn between resentment and the ache of witnessing genuine remorse. For the first time, she didn't see the billionaire CEO. She saw a man haunted by his choices. As thunder echoed again, Damien stood to leave, but Amara's voice stopped him. "They'll be fine," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "You don't have to pretend to care now." He turned, the flicker of pain unmistakable in his eyes. "Pretend," he whispered. "Amara, I've been pretending for years that I could live without them. Without you." Her breath caught, the air thick between them. The storm outside raged louder, lightning flashing across their faces as if the universe itself demanded they face the truth. He took a hesitant step forward, his voice trembling now. "I was a coward. I said things I didn't mean because I didn't know how to feel anything real. You showed me love, and I ran from it like it was weakness. But you made me human." Her tears threatened to fall, but she blinked them back. "And now?" she asked quietly. "Now you think you can just walk in and fix everything?" Damien shook his head slowly. "No," he murmured. "I just want to be part of what I destroyed, even if it's from the outside." Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the soft rain tapping against the window. For a fleeting moment, Amara's heart softened, remembering the warmth of his embrace from long ago, the same arms that now hung at his sides, uncertain and empty. But before she could speak, one of the twins stirred and whispered, "Mommy, don't be sad." The words pierced her. Damien looked away, his jaw tightening as tears welled up in his eyes, barely visible under the flicker of lightning. Would Amara let this fragile moment become a doorway to forgiveness? Or was it just another cruel reminder of what could never be restored? She turned her back to him, her voice steady again. "You should go, Damien," she said. "The girls need rest." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me," he whispered. His footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving behind an air thick with unspoken words. When the door finally clicked shut, Amara leaned against it, trembling as silent tears fell. She had spent years building walls to keep him out, yet tonight He had found his way back in, not into her life, but into the fragile corners of her heart. Outside, Damien stood in the rain, staring up at her window, the storm drenching him as if nature itself demanded penance. He had no idea what came next, but one truth pulsed inside him now. He could never walk away again. As dawn approached and the storm began to fade, would this night mark the beginning of healing, or ignite the fire of emotions neither of them was ready to face? The night after Damien stood outside her home in the storm had left Amara restless. Sleep eluded her. Every sound, every breath carried traces of his voice, his regret, the truth she had fought so long to ignore. The rain had stopped, but inside her heart, thunder still echoed. She sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the faint glow of dawn paint the sky, wondering why, after all these years, her heart still betrayed her at the sound of his name. Down the street, Damien's car sat idling. He hadn't left. He had waited there the whole night, staring at the faint light from her living room window as if it was the only beacon left in his life. The city was quiet, asleep, but inside those two souls, there was no peace. Would she open her door again or close it forever this time? Morning came, and Amara pushed through her routine as though nothing had changed, making breakfast, braiding Zaria's hair, helping Nia with her shoes. But the twins had a way of reading her emotions. Children always did. "Mommy, are you sad?" Zaria asked, tilting her head. Amara smiled faintly. "No, baby, just thinking." But deep down her thoughts were a storm of contradictions. She had built a fortress of independence, yet Damien's return had shaken its very foundation. Later that day, when she went to pick the twins up from school, her breath caught in her throat. Damien was already there, holding their backpacks, laughing softly as the girls chattered about their drawings. It was such a normal scene that it hurt. For years she had done it alone. Now he was there, effortlessly blending into a role she never thought he'd claim. Amara approached slowly, uncertain whether to be angry or grateful. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. Damien turned, his expression warm but tentative. "I know. I wanted to." His voice carried none of the arrogance she remembered. It was gentle now, filled with care he didn't know how to show before. The twins were oblivious to the tension. They tugged his hand and hers, laughing. "Let's go home together!" they shouted, and for the first time, the four of them walked side by side, a picture that looked like family but felt like a test of fragile healing. Was this the beginning of something new, or just a cruel illusion destined to break her heart again? Days turned into weeks, and Damien kept showing up, not with gifts, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He helped Amara with errands, attended the girls' school performances, sat quietly beside her during PTA meetings. He was there, steady, reliable, almost invisible in his effort not to intrude too deeply. Yet every moment he spent near her became another thread, pulling her closer. One evening after dinner, he stayed to help clean up, rolling up his sleeves, drying dishes while the twins giggled in the living room. Amara leaned against the counter, watching him. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said softly. He turned to her, eyes calm, but full of something raw. "I want to," he replied. "I missed every moment I could have been here. Let me earn a few back." The simplicity of his words cut deeper than any apology could. She looked away, pretending to focus on wiping the counter, but her chest ached. That night, after the twins went to bed, the house grew quiet except for the sound of the rain outside. A softer rain this time, like the world was breathing slower. Damien lingered by the door, hesitating. "Good night," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for letting me in again, even a little." She nodded, unable to speak, afraid that any word might crumble the fragile distance she had left between them. How long could she resist before her heart betrayed her again? As days passed, their connection deepened, subtle but undeniable. One evening, Amara found herself sitting with him on the porch after putting the twins to bed. The night air was cool, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. Damien leaned back, staring at the stars. "I used to think success meant being untouchable," he confessed. "Now I realize I was just lonely." Amara glanced at him, surprised by his openness. "You had everything," she said quietly. "Everything except what mattered," he replied. She turned away, her throat tightening. It wasn't fair. He wasn't supposed to sound sincere. He wasn't supposed to make her feel again. But he did. Every word, every glance chipped away at her resolve. Was this redemption, or another well-spoken illusion from a man who once broke her? The twins, innocent and full of joy, began to see Damien as more than a visitor. One Saturday morning, they climbed into his lap, showing him their drawings. "This is our family," Zaria said proudly, pointing at stick figures, 2 little girls, a mommy and a daddy with blue eyes. Damien's breath caught, tears threatening to spill. He looked up at Amara, who stood by the kitchen door, frozen. That picture said everything words couldn't. They see you," she whispered, her voice cracking. He smiled faintly, whispering back, "They see what I've been hoping to be." That afternoon, Amara found herself watching him play with the girls in the yard, the sound of their laughter echoing like music she hadn't heard in years. Her heart softened, despite every warning she gave herself. She remembered the man who once rejected her, but the one before her now wasn't the same. This one knelt to tie a child's shoelace, listened to stories about imaginary worlds, and smiled with warmth that looked real. The war within her intensified. Logic said no, but her heart whispered maybe. Could she truly forgive the man who once shattered her trust? Or was she walking into another heartbreak disguised as healing? Later that night, after tucking the girls in, Damien lingered in the hallway, unsure if he should stay or go. Amara turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "You've changed," she said finally. "Or maybe you're just showing who you really were all along." He swallowed hard. "I was lost," he admitted. "I didn't understand love back then. I thought control was strength and feelings were weakness. But you taught me the truth by walking away." Her eyes shimmered. "And now you think words can erase the pain?" she asked. He stepped closer, shaking his head. "No, only time. And what I do next." His proximity sent waves through her body, the scent of him, the warmth of his breath. It all awakened memories she had buried. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with tension, unspoken forgiveness and longing. Then Damien broke the silence. "I don't want anyone else," he said, voice trembling. "Only you and them. That's all I want for the rest of my life." The words hit her like lightning, every syllable dripping with truth and fear. She stared at him, trying to read his face, searching for the slightest trace of deceit, but there was none. His eyes were raw, glistening with tears he didn't bother to hide. Amara's heart raced. Part of her wanted to collapse into his arms, to let years of pain melt away in one embrace, but the other part whispered caution. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to fall into place," she said, voice trembling. "It's not that simple." Damien nodded. "I know," he whispered, "but I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait." She turned away, pacing slowly, her mind a storm. Everything she had built, her strength, her independence, her pride, was now clashing with the one thing she had spent years denying. Her heart still belonged to him. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. Damien took a careful step forward, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but not close enough to touch. "You once told me love wasn't about perfection," he said softly. "You said it was about showing up. I didn't understand that then. But now, I do." Would his sincerity be enough to break the walls she had built, or would fear keep her from reaching back for what her soul still craved? Her eyes glistened as she finally looked up at him. "Words are easy, Damien," she said. "It's what comes next that matters." He nodded solemnly. "Then let me show you," he replied. His gaze lingered on her a moment longer before he turned and walked toward the door. The moment he left, her knees weakened, her breath uneven, the war inside her reaching its peak. She clutched her chest, tears sliding down her cheeks as the twins' laughter echoed faintly from their room, a reminder of what was at stake, of what love could heal and what it could destroy. As the night deepened and Amara lay awake, torn between forgiveness and fear, one question haunted her. Could she truly trust the man who had once broken her heart, or was his love just another storm waiting to strike? The stormy night had ended, but its echo remained in Amara's chest, a pulse that thudded with uncertainty and unspoken emotion. The next morning carried an odd stillness, the kind that followed a storm's rage, when the air felt heavy but oddly new. Damien had left quietly after ensuring the twins were sleeping, leaving behind the faintest trace of his cologne and a note that read simply, "Thank you for letting me stay near them." It wasn't grand, it wasn't romantic, but it lingered in Amara's heart longer than she wanted to admit. Days slipped into weeks, and with each passing moment, Damien's presence became less an intrusion and more a quiet rhythm of life she could neither stop nor deny. He arrived with breakfast for the twins before work, helped with their art projects, and even repaired a leaking pipe one evening, standing there in rolled-up sleeves, laughter spilling from the twins as water splashed everywhere. That laughter, his laughter, was a sound she hadn't realized she missed. It had warmth. It had remorse. It had love, hidden beneath every softened syllable. Yet even as her heart softened, her mind screamed caution, whispering of all the nights she cried alone, all the pain he once caused when he said she wasn't enough. But when she saw him braiding one of the girl's hair, clumsy but determined, her defenses cracked, if only for a second. Could a man who once shattered her heart truly learn how to handle something as fragile as love? The city park became their neutral ground, a place between forgiveness and fear. The twins fed ducks while Damien and Amara sat in silence, the kind that was both comforting and dangerous. Damien, dressed casually in a charcoal hoodie and dark jeans, didn't look like the ruthless CEO anymore. He looked like a man stripped of pride, humbled by regret. "You don't have to pretend," she said softly, watching the twins laugh. "Pretend what?" he asked, his voice low. "That this is easy," she replied, her tone trembling between accusation and vulnerability. He looked away, jaw tight, eyes flickering with something raw. "It's not," he admitted. "Every day I fight the part of me that wants to run, because running is what I used to do when things scared me. But not anymore." His words hit deeper than she expected. For the first time, Amara realized Damien wasn't trying to buy his way back into her life. He was earning it, piece by piece, action by action, heart by heart. Still, her scars itched with memory. Could he ever truly erase the pain? Was this redemption, or another heartbreak dressed in sincerity? That evening, the twins insisted on a family movie night. Damien brought pizza and popcorn, pretending not to know their favorite toppings even though he remembered every detail from years ago. When one of the twins fell asleep on his lap, his expression softened with such tenderness that Amara felt her own breath catch. That image, a man once lost in arrogance, now cradling innocence, pierced her heart in ways she couldn't explain. After putting the twins to bed, Amara found Damien standing by the window, moonlight touching his features like an artist's brush. "You've changed," she whispered. He turned slowly, eyes heavy with truth. "No, I've finally become the man I should have been when I had you." Silence filled the room, thick and magnetic. He stepped closer, hesitant yet drawn by something neither could resist. She didn't back away this time. Instead, she searched his face for lies, and found none. His fingers brushed hers, a hesitant touch that carried the weight of years lost. Would she pull away, or let the fire reignite? Amara didn't know who moved first, but suddenly their lips met, soft, hesitant, trembling. It wasn't the desperate kiss of their youth. It was slower, deeper, layered with regret, forgiveness, and something dangerously close to love. The taste of him brought back everything she tried to bury, the nights of passion, the laughter, the way he used to whisper her name like a prayer. But just as the warmth spread through her chest, the cold whisper of fear slithered in. She pulled back, breathing heavily, eyes glistening with conflict. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't make promises you can't keep again." Damien's hand lingered near her cheek, trembling as he replied, "I won't. Not this time." The sincerity in his tone was disarming, almost unbearable. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to, but her past screamed louder. He looked down as if understanding her turmoil, then said quietly, "You have every right to hate me. But I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love right. Could love be reborn from the ashes of regret? Or was it destined to burn them both again?" The next few days blurred between warmth and hesitation. Amara found herself smiling at his messages, waiting for his calls, then hating herself for doing so. Damien didn't push. He simply stayed, steady, gentle, patient. He began attending the twins' school events, sitting in the back row quietly, eyes always searching for Amara's approval. One afternoon, after a parent-teacher meeting, they found themselves walking home together beneath a slow drizzle. "You don't have to keep proving yourself," she murmured. "Maybe I do," he replied softly. "Because you're not just forgiving me, you're teaching me how to love again." His words left her disarmed. Rain trickled down her cheeks, mixing with tears she hadn't realized were falling. They stopped under a streetlight, the world dim around them except for that golden halo of light. For a moment it felt like time itself held its breath. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his hand lingering just long enough for her to feel its tremor. Was she ready to risk everything for the man who once destroyed her world? That night, as she lay awake, Amara replayed every moment. His honesty, his patience, his silent devotion. The man she once knew would have demanded forgiveness. This one was quietly earning it. Somewhere deep down, a fragile hope began to bloom, tender but real. Yet love, she knew, wasn't just about longing. It was about trust, and that trust had been shattered once before. When Damien called the next morning to say he was taking the twins to the zoo, she hesitated before saying yes. Watching them later, laughing and holding hands with their father, something inside her softened completely. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not perfection, but effort. Damien looked at her across the crowd, eyes saying everything words couldn't. And in that look, Amara realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about freeing herself from the past. But would fate allow their fragile happiness to last, or was another storm waiting just ahead? That evening, as the sun dipped low, Damien walked her home after dropping off the twins. Neither spoke. The silence between them was its own kind of confession. When they reached her door, he hesitated, then said quietly, "There's something I need to tell you." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" she asked. His gaze fell to the ground before meeting hers again, eyes full of a pain she hadn't seen before. "After you left," he said slowly, "I tried to find you. So many times. I called your number. I went to your old apartment. I even searched hospitals because I thought—" His voice cracked. "I thought something had happened to you." Her breath caught, confusion and anger twisting inside her. "You never came," she whispered. You never tried hard enough." He shook his head. "I did, but every time, I let my pride stop me. I was terrified of what you'd think if I showed up broken. I wasn't the man you deserved then." His confession hung heavy in the air, raw and real. Amara's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she whispered, "You let your pride ruin everything." He nodded. "I know. And it's the greatest regret of my life." Would this truth bring healing or reopen the wound she'd just begun to close? In that quiet moment, beneath the soft glow of the porch light, everything seemed to still: the past, the pain, the pride. Amara reached up, fingertips brushing his jaw, her voice trembling as she said, "You're not the man I left." He swallowed hard. "I hope not." Then, as if drawn by gravity, their foreheads touched, breath mingling, hearts unguarded for the first time in years. The night wrapped around them, tender yet charged with emotion, as both realized that love, real love, wasn't about perfection or timing. It was about trying again, despite the fear. Amara exhaled softly, whispering, "Maybe we start small." Damien smiled faintly. "Small is fine, as long as it's real." But just as peace began to settle, a shadow from Damien's past was about to surface, one that could threaten the fragile trust they were rebuilding. The moment Amara heard that haunting voice from her past, the world seemed to slow, like a heartbeat skipping in shock. The man standing before her was Ethan Price, the one who had once comforted her during her darkest days, before she ever stepped into Damien's powerful orbit. But now, his unexpected reappearance brought confusion, not comfort. The lake shimmered behind them, the twins' laughter fading into cautious whispers as they sensed their mother's unease. Damien's presence was like a steady wall beside her, strong, protective, unwavering. "Amara," Ethan said, eyes darting toward the twins, "you never told me you had children." His tone carried accusation, hurt, and longing. Amara straightened, her voice calm yet firm. "Because you stopped being a part of my life the day you left without a word." The tension in her tone made even the breeze seem to hesitate. Damien's gaze hardened, but he stayed silent, allowing her to lead the confrontation, because this time it wasn't his story to dominate. It was hers to reclaim. Ethan took a step forward. "You moved on fast, didn't you?" His words stung, but Amara's reply was sharper. "I moved on strong." That silenced him. Damien finally stepped in, his voice low but commanding. "You need to leave. She doesn't owe you explanations." The air between the men thickened with rivalry, old wounds and masculine pride clashing under the fading sunlight. But then Amara turned to Damien, placing a gentle hand on his chest, grounding him. "Don't," she whispered. "He's not worth it." That moment, her choosing peace over chaos, reminded Damien just how far she had come. Would the ghosts of her past destroy their fragile peace, or make their love unbreakable? Ethan left with a final glare, but his presence lingered like a shadow over the evening. As night fell, Damien sat on Amara's porch, silent, watching the twins play with their dolls under the warm light. He was deep in thought, guilt gnawing at him, not for Ethan, but for the version of himself that had once hurt this incredible woman. "You okay?" Amara's voice came softly behind him. He looked up, his expression weary yet warm. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone," he said, "and yet you didn't let me." She sat beside him, their shoulders touching, her eyes reflecting both strength and tenderness. "Damien," she said quietly, "you're not the man I met years ago. Back then, you thought love was weakness. Now," she paused, smiling faintly, "now you fight for it." He turned to her, the emotion in his gaze raw and unguarded. "I don't just fight for it, Amara. I live for it. For you, for them. Could a man once defined by pride truly become one defined by love?" The following morning brought clarity like sunlight after a storm. Damien had made a decision. He wouldn't just tell Amara he'd changed, he'd prove it. He called his board together and announced something that stunned the entire room. "I'm stepping back," he declared, his voice steady. "It's time the company runs without me for a while. I have something more important to build, a life worth living." Murmurs rippled through the room, disbelief echoing from one executive to another. But Damien didn't care. For the first time, the weight of power didn't define him. Freedom did. That evening he arrived at Amara's boutique, sleeves rolled up, helping her rearrange displays, taking inventory, even sweeping the floor while the twins giggled nearby. Amara watched him from across the room. This man who once ruled skyscrapers, now kneeling to fix a broken shelf without complaint. It wasn't grand gestures that moved her. It was the quiet humility, the sincerity in his every movement. Could redemption truly erase the scars of betrayal, or would they always linger beneath the surface? Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their lives found harmony. Amara's boutique flourished, and Damien became not just a presence, but a pillar, attending the twins' school recitals, making breakfast on Saturdays, tucking them into bed with stories that made them laugh until they fell asleep. The twins adored him, calling him Daddy without hesitation one night, and the look on Damien's face was one Amara would never forget. He froze, eyes glistening, overwhelmed by the word he never thought he'd deserve. Amara's heart melted. This was no longer the cold CEO who barked orders. This was a man reborn through love, humility, and family. Would their newfound peace finally last, or was fate still waiting for one final test? The final test came quietly, not through betrayal, but through vulnerability. Damien received an offer, one that could rebuild his empire, take his name global again. But it required him to move abroad for 2 years. The old Damien would have jumped at the opportunity. The new Damien hesitated. That evening, he found Amara by the window, the golden glow of the city wrapping her in warmth. "I turned down the deal," he said simply. She turned, stunned. "What?" "Damien, it wasn't worth losing what I've just found," he interrupted gently. "I built empires before, Amara. But none of them ever made me feel like this, like home." The honesty in his words made her throat tighten. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly as they reached for his. "You gave up everything for us." He smiled softly. "No, I finally gave up everything for me. Because loving you is my everything. Could love truly rewrite a man's legacy? Or would the world try to reclaim him again?" The next morning, Damien surprised Amara with a small rooftop gathering, a celebration not of wealth, but of life. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered as laughter filled the air. The twins ran around with balloons, their giggles echoing like music. When it was time for a toast, Damien took Amara's hand, pulling her gently to the center. "4 years ago," he began, his voice steady but emotional, "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought love was something I could control, something I could deny. But standing here today, with you, with them, I know now that love isn't about control, it's about surrender, and I surrender to it completely." The guests clapped softly, some wiping tears. Amara looked at him, her heart overflowing. "You're different," she whispered. "No," he replied, smiling. "You made me better." Would their story end here, or was it only the beginning of something greater? As the sun began to dip below the skyline, painting the world in amber and gold, Amara and Damien stood side by side, watching the twins chase the last light of day. The wind carried laughter, love, and the unspoken promise of forever. Damien wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "You know," he murmured, "I used to think success meant owning everything. Now I realize it means having something you'd never trade for the world." Amara leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "And what's that?" she asked softly. He smiled, his eyes glimmering with warmth. You. Her laughter was soft, like music carried by the wind. The city below them glowed, alive, vibrant, just like the love they had fought so hard to protect. Could two people so broken truly become whole together? Or had they already done the impossible? As night descended fully, Damien lifted the twins into his arms, spinning them around as they squealed with joy. Amara watched, her heart swelling until it felt too full to contain. She saw not the CEO who once dismissed her, but the man who had learned to love without fear. She walked closer, wrapping her arms around all three of them, the four of them merging into a single silhouette under the soft city glow. "We're finally home," she whispered. Damien nodded, his voice tender. "And I'm never leaving again." The twins hugged them tighter, their laughter echoing into the night. For the first time, every broken piece of their story felt perfectly placed. There were no more regrets, no more fears, just the steady pulse of love, beating strong and true. As the moon rose high, reflecting on the quiet city skyline, Damien kissed Amara's forehead, whispering, "Our love isn't a story of mistakes anymore. It's the proof that forgiveness can turn even the deepest scars into beauty." Amara smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Then let's make it our legacy." The twins ran between them, laughter spilling into the night, their joy the living symbol of everything they had lost and found again. And as the family stood together beneath the stars, Amara radiant, Damien redeemed, their story didn't end. It transformed into something eternal, because true love, once broken and rebuilt, becomes unshakable. Their love was no longer a wound, it was a legacy. And though their story had reached its final page, the hearts they touched and the lessons they lived would echo far beyond the end, leaving viewers yearning for one more heartbeat, one more promise, one more chapter that would never fade. And that's the end of this unforgettable journey, a story of heartbreak, forgiveness, and a love that refused to be broken. What did you feel in this story? Did Damien truly deserve a second chance, or was Amara's forgiveness the real hero? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video with someone who loves a passionate love story, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart. Remember, love can heal even the deepest scars. Stay tuned for our next story, only here on Beyond Color Stories.